What's up guys, Josiah here. In this video I will be reviewing an application for OS X called Max. Max is a combination ripping and encoding tool that basically allows you to take a CD and convert it to multiple formats, and it actually is capable of converting to several formats which are iPod compatible. So as with my other reviews, I'm going to focus on just the formats that you can then sync to your iPod. So now I'm just going to walk you guys through the preferences. Under General, you can just see some basic options here. One thing that I really like about it is that it is capable of taking advantage of multiple cores. So let's say you have a Core 2 Duo processor. It's capable of encoding 2 tracks at once with no lag in encoding speed at all. So that definitely comes in handy. Next, under the Formats tab, you can see that you have some basic options here that I've already set up. You can also add any one of these formats to the list up here simply by double clicking it. So let's say that we want to add MP3 to our list. You simply double click it. It'll ask you to set up several options. Now we'll choose transparent for the purpose of this review because transparent means that to most people the files that you're going to encode are going to sound just like a CD. So we'll go ahead and just stick with these options as they are and say OK. And then if you want to be able to use this setting when you insert a CD and you want to start encoding, you just click it in like this. And now when you insert a CD and begin the encode process, it will encode to both FLAC format and MP3. Now just as a heads up, FLAC is essentially like a zip file for music. And FLAC will essentially compress the file without letting it lose any of its original quality. Now MP3 uses what's called a lossy compression technique. Now lossy means that it'll essentially take data out of the file that you aren't going to notice is missing, and that's what allows it to make much smaller versions of the CD that you're listening to. So let's say we're going to stick with these two formats here. Next we're going to go to the Output tab. Now I have it set so that it'll automatically send the files to my archive folder that I've created over here. So we'll just stick with that. This is a good naming scheme for our needs, and the rest of these options really aren't all that important. Next, under the ripping section, I'm basically just going to explain to you what each of these options are. Now I have it set up just as a basic ripper. You can also set it up to use what's called Paranoia, and this is handy if you have, let's say you have a scratch CD and you're having problems getting a good sounding rip from it. Well, what Paranoia will do, it'll actually try to read on either side of the scratch and redeem some of the data that might be hiding under the scratch, and in most cases it actually has very good results. Now I have it set up as a basic ripper just because when it uses Paranoia, if it finds a scratch, there's a good chance it's going to take a very long time when it's encoding. If this is worth it to you, then I suggest using this option. Otherwise, a basic ripper should suit you just fine. The next setting that I like is that it actually will automatically retrieve your CD's data just like iTunes, but it'll use a library called MusicBrainz as opposed to the CD database that iTunes uses. Now you can configure Max to use other CD databases by configuring it here. You'll just need to simply find the information of the database that you want to use and enter it in these blanks here. But I've decided to use MusicBrainz as the default, as usually I'd say about 75% of the CDs will have tags and they will also be correct. In some cases I do have to go in and correct the tags later, but so far it seems like I found fairly good results. These two tabs here really aren't all that important unless you find having album art for your files a handy feature, in which case Max will actually retrieve the album art from Amazon.com, and you can choose to let it embed the album artwork into the file, or you can choose to have it simply save the artwork in the folder where you're saving your files. And then finally, because we're creating a file that is iPod compatible, you can set it so that it automatically adds these files to your iTunes library just as if you're importing the CD using iTunes. And then this last option here, let's say you had an external, what's called a compressor. Essentially this would then send the file that you just ripped and encoded to your computer. It would send it to this program. And in a future video I will be reviewing several programs that will allow you to do this. But for now, we're going to go ahead and stick with these options that I've already walked you through. Now you can see I've already inserted the CD here. Now MusicBrainz will not retrieve the genre name for you, so you may have to manually type that in. All the rest of the information that I have saved here I'm happy with, but just for the sake of showing you guys, you can edit a track's name simply by clicking on it and hitting the tab button. Then you can edit the track name like this, hit enter, and then you can use the arrow key to navigate down to the next one, hit the tab button, edit the information there, and so on and so forth. It's very easy to use, and it just takes a little bit of practice to get used to. Then let's say that you're happy with these settings. Go ahead and just click Select All, and then click Encode. Now it's beginning to rip the CD to the hard drive, and this hasn't begun any kind of an encode process. This is just simply copying the CD to the hard drive, and then it's going to begin what's called the encode process, and this will actually take that data that was copied over and encode it to the format that we want. Now you'll notice, as soon as it's done ripping this track here, it'll bring up a separate window, and you can see it's actually compressing to both of these formats at the same time with no lag in speed at all. Now I have it set so that as it's finishing up the ripping process, it will automatically eject the CD when the ripping process is done. And then once the encode process here is completely done, it will completely close out of both windows. And the import is complete. And now with that demonstration in mind, there were just a few thoughts that I had. One in particular is that when you insert a CD, it will automatically load the file into iTunes and Macs at the same time, so both windows will pop up, and then you have to go through the process of closing iTunes each time. And that's one of those things that you'll have to think about if you're trying to decide whether to use Macs or not. It's not really a big deal to me, but this may be something to keep in mind. Another thing is that occasionally MusicBrainz will not retrieve the track names for your CD, and you'll have to actually go online and find the names of the CD and then manually enter in the track names yourself. This can be a hassle at sometimes, and in most cases iTunes has no problem retrieving the track names of these same CDs. So again, this is one of those things that you're going to have to think about before deciding whether you're going to be using Macs. But that said, I hope this video was helpful. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I hope to hear from you guys soon. Talk to you later.